Okay, guys, we're back. So in this live, we're talking about relationships with people that we love, specifically in family situations. So parents, child. I don't have kids, but I do have parents. I'm a child, not a child anymore, but and even like people that we see every day. So someone that you would consider family. So it doesn't have to be blood related or anything like that, but someone that you see on a regular basis and you have a deep connection with. So now, because we're starting this afresh, I just want to reiterate that this is brought up because relationships are so important. They're really, really beautiful, but they're also very tricky, and they're tricky to deal with sometimes because they're a very blatant and very close representation of our inner kind of thoughts and feelings about ourselves. And it's the last thing that we want to believe, especially if something is aggravating us a lot, or if something is making us feel like it's them, it's not me. It's, the last thing that we would want to think is like, oh no, that's me projecting on them. Definitely not. So let me just come from a place of my own experience with relationships that change in dynamics as time passes. So, when you're a child, you look up to your parents and they are your world. They're the ones. Thank you, Phil. Good to see you guys here again. Yeah, so our parents, when we're young, when we're toddlers, we look at them and they're our safety net. They're everything. They set the tone. We learn from them. Whatever they say, we listen to, and that's it. And then as we get older, you become a child, and then you become a teenager. And in your teenage years, you start to think, well, I have my own choices. Anusha, good to see you here as well. JT Spivey, you haven't been hypnotized before. What makes you bring up the hypnotism? Is it from a video that you watched here about the hypnotizing? So then we become teenagers, and then around that time we start to develop our own thoughts and opinions, and those thoughts or opinions are ones that we can use, we challenge our parents with, and then we become adults, and then life evolves. And you might even have children of your own, and then things really start to change. And sometimes you can come from a place of, you might have one relationship which is better with one parent than the other, or maybe they're good with both, but there's one that you go to more for certain things, and then another parent, your other parent, you go to more for the other things. Now, for me personally, yeah, my relationships have changed. The dynamics have changed over the years. And there were times where, a relationship with one person that I love becomes specifically tricky. Yeah, like really, really tricky because maybe we disagree. We disagree with a lot of things. We disagree from almost like a fundamental level. And in those times, it was trickiest because how do you show love to someone who you don't really agree with? And you might even question, what kind of love exists here, But I don't know what came upon me around that time, but I sort of took a step back. I must have been about in my early 20s. I took a step back and I said, okay, if I wasn't looking at this person as that person that I love and have all those expectations from them of how they should be around me and what they should be, as that person in my life, what would that leave me with? And I said, well, that leaves them as just a blank slate person. They're just another human being. When you look at people that you don't know, you don't really have expectations of them, right? Like, look at the people that you don't know, the people that you walk across, you pass by in the streets, and you're not like looking at them, wanting them to, you don't have a lot of expectation. You have like superficial expectations and maybe social norms, social behaviors, and that's pretty much, but you don't have like deep expectations. But the closer that someone gets to you in your life, the more you expect, the more we expect from those people that we love. Anyway, so during this really difficult time, I took a step back and was like, okay, if this person wasn't that to me, what am I left with? Who are they then? What is their identity? What is the lens that I look at them through? And removing all those filters, I was like, oh, well, they're just a person then. So I'm just catching up in the comments. I would love to be hypnotized because I have a truck full of issues with my adoptive family. Paul says we sometimes forget that our parents were people who had their own lives. That's right. We forget that our parents had their own lives before us. And we also forget that because, sometimes we look at our parents and you just see them as like especially when you're young, they're like the pillar of all information. You know what I mean? We're like, they are the pillar of everything that we know. And we forget that they have challenges in their own life. They have their own dreams, that they have their own struggles. But it's like when you're the child, you think that that's not the case. You think that they're the hero at all times and that everything they do is one or the other. So when I did this exercise, so I was in my early 20s and I stripped off the filters and I was like, all right, well, then I can see this person as just a person. And that was so refreshing because, I feel like we don't realize those filters that we have towards people that we love, they can actually be a burden when they can actually be a burden because there's so many filters. You almost can't see the truth. You can't see who they really are. You almost feel like, okay, these are your faults. These not your faults. Like these are your flaws, and this is what you're good at. And imagine seeing a person only through two filters, good or bad. Imagine also being the person who's being seen as either good or bad. How can you ever really be neutral, and how can you ever really be yourself? So that's something that I sort of took with me as time passed and, got older and then the dynamic changed again with another person. And and this one was really tricky because with this relationship, we used to be almost like identical, I was like, it was my joy. And then all of a sudden things were changing. And I realized when I stepped away from the conversations when we were arguing and I stepped away, I was like, because I was changing. I was changing, I was growing, my belief systems were growing. And I couldn't help but blame the other person for still feeling like or believing things about myself that I didn't want to believe about. Not because they were making me feel like that, but because I was putting it through that filter again. I was like, guys, every time I'm in this room, I think there's a lot of dust. And that's why I have this like air purifier because I get dust, I get like a itchy nose. So I'm always like this on my lives. Anyway, so okay, so going back to that. So when this relationship changed, I was really confused because I was like, how can this relationship which used to be so perfect, how can it be the one that really gets me the wrong way all the time? And I want to talk to that person, but I simply can't because it just makes me feel like nothing that I ever do is good enough. And and every time I'd step away from that relationship, I'm like, I know that that's not the case, but I feel like that's the case when we're around each other or when we're speaking. And so I had to go in deep and I was like, is there a possibility that that's how I see myself? Is there a possibility that almost want to really force my new belief systems about who I am? I almost wanted to just really push it upon them so that they could stop projecting their own thoughts about me to me, and like let me be. But then I realized it wasn't about that. It was actually nowhere near about anything to do about me trying to change them and their belief systems about themselves and what they're projecting upon me, blah, blah, blah. It was more about I'm in me, my life, and my belief system about myself. What can I do so that when I feel as though they're projecting upon me, what can I do so that I'm not affected? Like if I were to paint a picture, let's say there's all this energy, and there's two ways about it. There's like energy, 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 and there's two ways. There's one where you can just block it, energy, energy, energy. And if you do that for a very long time, it can be quite exhausting. Because imagine if this was like steel wall and you just make that wall thicker and thicker and bigger. And this person's still in there because this over here is not negative. It's actually them just being themselves. But because you're trying to escape them, you're the one feeling the weight. They actually mean well, but it's just like this, and you're the one who's getting burdened by it. But there's another option, which is not so much to have the steel wall, but to have something that can take the energy and then diffuse it and transform it into something else so that by the time it touches you, you're not really that affected. and therefore they can still be themselves and you can be yourself, and your dynamics can still sort of shift and like you can still change, but you can still have that relationship of something that's like just warm and loving, rather than a push-pull. And this is something that I'm learning. It's still quite new to me, like this whole understanding of transforming energy. And it's really quite a practice, especially if you're highly triggered. I feel like I've been in that position where, you know what I mean? It's really people that we love. It's those relationships that are really, how do you be? How do you be? How do you continue a relationship where being around each other is, fulfilling? And I'm not saying that it always has to be perfect, but it's just that in life we change. And I kind of do want to challenge how we think of what relationships should be and how they should always be good, because it's, in any one time, one person is going to be going through one thing and another person is going to go through another thing, and they're seeing the world through that lens and this person's seeing the world through that lens. Then at sometimes it's going to go in the same direction, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just going to go up here and it's going to go up there, and that's totally okay. And I kind of feel as though what we don't have enough of out there in terms of like how we get educated around being around people and being in our own family, and how to sort of deal with adversity within those close relationships. Because I feel as though we have systems which allow us to deal with adversity on an external level, but then dealing with adversity on a very close, tight-knit level is almost like, if you don't choose it, you don't have it. And it's, to me, sometimes I wonder why is like, not superficial, but why is like that level of information or education or assistance available, but everything else that's actually like our closed lives, like our home lives, they're like they're not really like, what do you even search for? Like when you search for like help for these things, you almost feel like you feel broken. You're like, no, nothing's wrong with me. Because every time we say those words like therapy, wellness, or like, relationship counseling, or like family counseling, you just feel like something's wrong. You know what I mean? But it's not that anything's really wrong. The reality is, like, families and people, ourselves as individuals, we're evolving creatures. And as we live our life, like the way our life is right now, it's all very fast paced, right? So there's this person meeting all these people in their work, and then this person in their work, this one's feeling fulfilled in their work today, this one's feeling like, I hate my job. And like, we're at, like, on an individual level, we all go through these different experiences. So it would be so great if there were certain systems which didn't always, some systems out there that really nurtured individuality within a collective, if that makes any sense. We're all individuals, but we're part of a collective. Our own family units are a collective, and we just, and we kind of just, without this, you kind of go into your relationships, and some days it's going to be easier and some days it's not, and some days it's going to be so tricky that you almost want out. Like, I want out of this relationship, it's not working out. One thing that I learned from one of the courses that I did, it was actually quite striking. So in this one course, I think a woman invited her husband to do the course, and they were about to split up. Like, they were like, there was no romance. They were each blaming each other. This person's like this. It really irritates me when he does that. It really annoys me when she does that. She's always like this. He's always like that. And then they did this course. And this wasn't a relationship course, to be honest. It was a personal development course. They did the course. And then when they came back, like a few days later, to talk about it, the guy was like, I didn't realize that there were so many things that he realized that he stopped seeing in her, because they'd been together for so long. He stopped seeing a bunch of things about her because his perception of what annoyed him about her became so great. So like, you start off your relationship and you're like, oh, I really like you. Oh, I like you as well. So you both like each other. You're both at this level. And then you go honeymoon phase. And you're like, oh, we're so in love. We're so in love. And you go through this level. And then years pass. And then you start to go, oh, this person's got some flaws. Oh, yeah, it's annoying. But I still love you. Like things are working out. And then challenges in life come, like that's how life is. There's going to be perfect days, there's going to be some really tough, and sometimes there are phases in life which is so tricky, and it's those times where all the flaws get highlighted. Why is that? Because you might be finding yourself in a place of stress, you might be finding yourself, you're just not your best self, or one of you is, or both of you are not your best self, and then that's when like the flaws become highlighted and they become so big. And if you never get back to that point, and if you don't take the time, it's more about taking the time or making the choice to not just see the other person as okay, but honestly, like during stressful situations, that's also when we are most judgmental of ourselves. And when we are so judgmental of ourselves, the only thing that really comes out is judgment upon others as well, because remember, like our dynamics are kind of a reflection of who we are as well. So when you get to a place where like the thing that annoys you about the other person is so much greater than everything else that you used to see about them that was good in the early days, and it overtakes it, and there's been, you don't make the time to see the other person in a different light and see yourself in that good light, and kind of like, being in your stress and still forgive yourself and love yourself in that moment, then that's when things really become a burden. And next thing you know, it's been a burden for 2 years. The next thing you know, it's been a burden for 10 years. And you're just starting to walk, you're like this. Internally, you're like this. In the outer world, we can pose, still be like this, but on the inside, we're like, we're really down. And so what I'm saying is, I think it's really important to really be able to sort of just embrace the fact that we're all individual creatures. And though we might have a higher number of shared beliefs with the people that we love, like our parents, our romantic relationship, it may not always be like that. And I guess what then becomes the question is not necessarily like, how do I get out? We don't believe in the same things anymore. Sometimes it's almost like, okay, what does love look like in this relationship during this phase? It's a different question, don't you think? When you're not trying to get out of something right away and you think the other person's so wrong, or even you're wrong, like, I'm not in this anymore, blah, blah, blah. And we kind of be like, what does love look like in this place? And I think what really makes that up is kind of being like, really being able to ask ourselves, like, am I happy in myself? Am I fully happy in myself? Like without this relationship, with or without this relationship, am I fully happy with myself? Because if the answer is really like, well, I'm really not too sure, the reality is whether you leave a relationship or you stay in the relationship, if the question about happiness internally is answered with maybe, maybe not, what that's really going to lead to is whether you're out of the relationship or in the relationship, it's the same answer. So, sometimes we look at the other people that we're with in a relationship and be like, no, it's them. But really, there's just something that we haven't found yet, that where is that lack of happiness coming from? And if we can even just accept that that's a possible answer, of, that it's because it's okay to not be completely fulfilled. It's like so okay. It's more the resistance that makes it harder. Like if you resist that you're not happy and it's not caused by your partner, your parents, your kids or whatever, and we're resisting that, like surely it's all their fault. You know what I mean? Like can't be me, because I'm pretty sure inside I'm pretty happy. Like where do we go from there? Like what do we then do if it's not them? So going back to the main point, like with life changes and shifts and things like that, from my personal experience, something that's worked really well is if I were to stop looking at everything else externally that's not ideal right now and change the question. Instead of being like, how do I change this person, or how do I stop communication with this person? Just like, sometimes it's okay if you sort of like pause the communication for a little while, but what if we transform that question and be like, okay, things aren't ideal right now, but what does love look like today in this situation? What does love look like in my relationship today, with life being as it is? And being able to answer that question allows you to already provide yourself some solutions. You don't have to come up with this world changing solution. It's just be like, okay, well, maybe today it just means that we're not going to be talking a lot. Maybe we're just going to sort of, there, you're going to be over there and I'm going to be over here. But it's not in a place anymore where you want to like tell them everything that's wrong with them and why it's not working. Because I think there's this impression that we think that relationships should always, every day, 24/7 be working, but sometimes it can go for 3 months, 4 months, 2 years at a time where it hasn't been ideal. And so, and I'm not, this isn't even just about romantic relationships. This can really even be with like people like our parents or our siblings. Siblings are, that can be tricky as well, especially the closer you were. Do you ever find this, like the closer you are or you were, the harder it is to accept that things aren't perfect anymore, or not anymore? Because when you say anymore, that alludes to the idea that it's done and it's never going to get good again. But it's more so we live in the present, right? So when we talk about living in the present, something that's hard today may not be that hard tomorrow. It might be a 10 out of 10 hard today, but maybe tomorrow it might be like 9.8 hard. And it's only a 0.2, it's only 0.2 movement, but it's movement nonetheless. And what I do know to be true is the more that we work on and sort of like truly be like, okay, am I happy inside with myself, with or without this relationship? It's such a great step in the right direction, because one thing I also know is sometimes ending relationships that you feel aren't working, they're a great place to start at a clean slate, and also a great place to, we've all, I don't know how old you all are, but maybe you've had one breakup in the past, at least minimum. And you kind of be, when you're young and you get in a relationship and you're like, how do I get over this? And you start your new life. We've been there in that situation where we make ourselves over and we're like our new best self. But it's almost like it is kind of a necessary step to take, whether you stay in a relationship or not, whether you continue a relationship or not. And again, like I said, that could be your siblings, that could be parents, that could be your romantic relationship. Whatever the case, sometimes the friction is, it's kind of like a good time to be like, hey, okay, this friction is happening. And sort of where am I in this place? You know what I mean? Where do I sit in this? How do I feel about this? And how can I make it better? Not necessarily for the other person all the time. Sometimes it's more like internally. Is there something that I'm not fulfilled with in my life? And honestly, it's a really tricky question to ask, because I've not always been like this. Never. Oh my God, if I were to tell you, like, this has been like hardcore training of the mind. And almost, to me, looking at a life back then, the only option I thought was like to start afresh. I guess a little bit, that's what I knew. As a child, I went to a lot of different schools, a lot. I was always new at, grade 5, I was new. Grade 10, I was the new kid. I was always the new kid. And I guess in some ways no one put this upon myself, but myself, because that was my experience in life. What came after that was that whenever things got hard, what I wanted to do was to start afresh. I didn't actually know how to be like, no, this is hard. How can I be in this situation and ride the wave and be part of the transformation to making it less hard and then making it easy? I'd not really known that as an option. That option only came to me as I got older. And, when an option hasn't, okay, put it like this. It's like someone said, hey, I've got a quiz for you. Here's the question. What's your answer? Is it A or is it B? And then no one ever told you that there was an option C. Like, how do you even look at option C when it was invisible to you? How? And so it's how, it's not, it wasn't even an option for you. So how could you even choose it? And that's how it was for me. So for me, it was like, okay, be in the situation, end the situation. That's it. I didn't really know that option C was like, no, be in the situation, ride the wave, and be part of the solution. And I think I don't really remember what it was that brought me to that. But one thing that I did learn is how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so if you're, I was like thinking, if I'm like that in my relationships or if I'm like that in my work, that was something that was very existent in my work. If I'm like that in my work, what does that look like in my relationships? Like, what doesn't matter. Anyone who, I love, like my friend relationships. And I'm not saying that all relationships are worth holding on to. We don't need to hold on to every single relationship that's ever been built in our life. But it's more so the ones that are really deep for you and things that you feel as though you might have even wanted to fight for. There are some relationships where it was hard, but you really wanted to fight for it. And so the outcome of that was kind of like, when I realized that there was option C, I thought, let me explore that. Oh my gosh, exploring it was probably the hardest thing because it felt very unnatural. When you start exploring an option that you don't even know what it looks like to be in that option, you don't know how to behave, right? And what that looked like for me was more like sitting in the discomfort and kind of being like, oh yeah, I feel really indifferent about this. But what I discovered was like, but nothing bad is happening. Like nothing insane is happening. It feels indifferent and I think I can ride with this. And then once you can accept that indifference, the indifference eventually transforms to something else. It transforms to things like, first of all, you can get distracted. And sometimes that's kind of a good thing because once you get distracted, you can start, it's no longer negative nor indifferent. It's just like neutral. So it's almost like it feels like you go through these different levels of emotion. First, it's like, meh, and then it's still like, a bit awkward, don't know. And then it's like neutral. And neutral is not a bad place to be. It's just not a bad place. Hey, it's like, here's 0, here's positive, here's negative, but there's actually nothing wrong with 0. And then after that neutrality, you have the option to sort of move up in the chain of emotions and opinions and behaviors. And then it just gets to a place where it's gotten okay again. And it might not be fireworks, it might not be like the best time of your life, but it's better than it used to be. And like this whole scale of emotions and experience, like I said, doesn't necessarily always happen over 2 hours or 2 days. Sometimes it can happen over 2 years. Sometimes it can happen with big, long gaps of not really talking that much. But I will say something else that helps with relationships with people that we love is having the conversations that we don't want to have. And I sometimes even wonder, like, why are some simple conversations, they're just simple, but why are they so hard to have? Why can't we just tell someone with ease and just be like, like, I feel hurt? Why is it hard to admit that sometimes? Or why can it be really hard to admit apology and be like, I don't think that what I did was of the best thing, and I apologize for that. Or even, I want to almost ask you the question, what do you think is the hardest thing to say to people that you really, really love and you're so close to them that talking about it is so obvious that you don't want to talk about it? So I want you to have a think about that. Okay, I'll tell you what it is. People that we love the most, that are closest to us, that we see very often, can also be the people that we find hardest to say I love you to. Isn't that crazy? And yet it's the one thing that, when we talk about neutralizing negative or positive energy and just bringing it to a level of honesty and truth, It's literally those 3 words, like, "Hey, I love you, hey." It's like, but why is it, the hardest thing to hey, platonic sage, welcome, good to see you here. Why is it the hardest thing to say? And I mean, I don't even have kids, but I think as well, I have parents, and I feel, and I, I see how people are, and I think it's been great to be able to see other people in their space of vulnerability through these like personal development courses, because you start to realize, oh, it's not just me who feels like this, or it's not just me who struggles through this, but like I think that sometimes when we feel as though we haven't been in integrity and we haven't done the best things for our relationships, the relationships that we really, really value, the hardest thing is to say, like, I didn't do the best thing in the world, and I love you. It doesn't, just we can do we can make mistakes, we can take action that was just not the best, but it doesn't make you really a bad person. And for some reason, sometimes we think that if we've done something wrong and it wasn't in integrity, that you don't deserve to express that you love someone still. You can make mistakes and still love someone, you know. Just because you made mistakes doesn't mean you can't say, I did this and I love you. Those two things can still go hand in hand together in in a conversation. But there's this belief that they just don't belong together. So I'll tell you a story. One time I had to have a really hard conversation, and I just didn't think that I could, but I did. And I made the phone call, and I didn't really know how to start it. I just felt like, how do I start this conversation? This relationship's been so volatile for so many years, and who am I even? Like, I don't even think this person knows that I know what's going on. Like, what am I trying to say? I don't want to make them feel wrong. So I had all these questions floating around in my head, but then the only important question to ask myself at the time was like, do I care about this relationship? That's really the only question that matters. What faces us when we're about to have a conversation that we need to have with someone that we love. The only question that really matters at that time isn't those doubtful questions. It's more the question of like, how do I want this relationship to continue? Do I value it enough to have this conversation? And that's the only question I honestly think any one of us should be asking ourselves at that time when we're on the cusp. Sometimes you're like, yeah, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to have this conversation. And then you pick up the phone and then you're like, but then what if they feel wrong? What if they feel like I'm making them wrong? What if they feel like this and that and the other? And then you're just like, okay, never mind. And you're like literally one button away from making the call and you don't make it. So going back to that story, I made the call and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to freaking start this conversation. But then I was like, why don't you just start it off and say, hey, I was just, oh my God, how did I say it? I was just ringing to let you know that whatever has happened, that I love you, and that that I just want you to know that there's no judgment on my part. And that was it. We didn't even go into detail. And that turns out that was all that was needed. It was like, I don't know why we overcomplicate what we need to say. I don't even really know why we overcomplicate to ourselves what we think we need to say, when all that really matters is we say the things that matter. And the reality is, even if you say like, hey, I'm here and I'm not here to judge, and I love you, it doesn't mean that no further mistakes will be made. To be honest with you, it doesn't even promise you, and it doesn't guarantee you that your relationship is going to be at the highest level after that, but it will take off a huge layer of weight. Tegs, is it Teg? I can just see Tegs SMCA. I don't know how to pronounce it. Is it Tegsma? I don't know. I'm not adopted, no. However, I feel I haven't been able to catch up on the comments, but the we're talking, yeah, Anusha, you've mentioned that you had a hard time. I think I have to catch up properly to be able to say. I still remember thinking of the conversation I never had. It was exhilarating. So, platonic sage, so you were supposed to have a conversation and you never had it. Is there, I would ask, if I were in your shoes and you were it was exhilarating, right? So I would ask myself in your shoes today, because every day is an opportunity. Actually, every moment is an opportunity. Is there a chance that you might entertain that thought again to bring up that conversation? And if there is, how does it make you feel? Because you always have the opportunity to sort of bring it up and take the chance to have the conversation. And you know what it is. The fear is greater. It often feels greater than the actual doing of it. When you're finally doing it, it's actually nowhere near as bad as the fear itself. The fear is like so all consuming. But by the time you open your mouth and say those words, there's something about it that's released. And the feeling is just, it's like you can breathe. It's like your airways become open and you can breathe. And it's just, I think we're afraid of being judged, and and I think sometimes we're afraid that we think that the people that we're speaking with are being judged. And so anyway, opening up that door and opening that conversation, like I said, it didn't transform everything to perfection afterwards, but it did open up a door and a possibility to make that relationship better. And that's all that was really needed. So then I'll tell you, like, after that conversation, it was, it was like this exhilarating relief and it was great. And then it was kind of like took a little dip again. Old belief systems and habits exist, how we see a person, even though we've had that conversation, sometimes you don't just permanently unveil that way of looking at them. But what you do is you're able to start realizing when you're sitting in judgment versus when you're sitting in love. And you really feel the difference. You really feel the difference of sitting in judgment versus love. Sitting in judgment is almost tricky as sitting in love. But what happens is, this is what happens. You are able to take yourself from a place of stagnation where there was nothing happening. There was nothing. It was just nothing. It was just stuck. We talk about gridlock in the last few videos, but this time you loosen it up a little bit and you're no longer in gridlock. And what that means is you start to be able to create space for healing, for progress, for moving forward. And sometimes what that is, it's just momentum. That unlock is probably one of the most powerful things you can do. And that's why sometimes it can feel like the hardest thing to face. Saying those words to people that we love, and even more so, being able to say it and then sit in non-judgment of everything that they're about to say. Because remember, when you're out there opening up a new conversation that you're afraid of having, it really, you do open yourself up to be in a spot where they might say things that you don't like. And so your next step, after you being the one to volunteer the words that you want to say, is to kind of sit there and try to hear them out without the highest level of judgment. There's almost, do you mentally prepare for that or not? I've been in both situations where I've done some mental preparation, and sometimes I reacted, and there were times where I didn't react, and I was able to sort of diffuse what I heard a lot easier. And again, there's no guaranteed way, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it, because you're much better off having the momentum to healing rather than to never opening that door. And we only have one life. Like, it blows my mind that we actually only have one life. It's really starting to dawn on me. And if that's the case, it's much better and juicier to have these, these relationships that we build upon. And for all I know from experience and everything that I've learned so far, is that working on relationships, especially the ones that mean something to us, they're the hardest, but they're also the most worth it. Like, they really are. Often these relationships are with people that we are almost, we must spend time with. No one's forced to spend time with anyone, right? We're not really, it's not really the case, but our close loving relationships are the ones where we do spend time with people. And there's a very big difference between spending time with someone in joy and like okayness than feeling like you just don't even want to be there. So that's that brings us to the end of today's chat, and I really cannot wait to Teagues. Thank you. I just saw your message, Teagues. That's how it said. Teagues. You must have been laughing like Teagues. What are you saying? Teagues smart. Anyway, so yeah, that brings us to the end of today's chat. I hope that was valuable. I was prompted to have this conversation. I don't know, there's something happened this week where it was like the topic. So I thought, hey, let's bring it up. So I look forward to catching up on the comments. Please let me know if you have a request for next week, next Friday. I kind of bring up these topics as the week goes by, and I see, okay, what was the key topic that happened, like that came up this week? But if you have any requests, please let me know, and then we'll talk about that. So I wish you a happy Easter, guys. It's Easter Sunday. Easter Sunday is coming up. And enjoy the rest of the day. It's Good Friday here in Australia. I don't know if you're in America, then you guys are not. You guys are one day behind. So yeah, whatever the case, have a happy Easter weekend, and I'll see you guys next week. Oh, by the way, I'm going to put, for anyone related but unrelated, anyone who's here who's been wanting to start a YouTube channel, I'm dropping a video this week about the 5 first video ideas that will actually blow up your channel. I know there's a few videos out there like, 72 ideas, but really these are the ones that I know blew up the channel and got thousands of views, but not just thousands of views, but made money. So I'll be dropping that video Wednesday this week. Oh, Nusha, you're in Switzerland. How cool. Oh, it always blows my mind when I find out where you guys are from. I'm like, you guys are so far away, but we're all here in the same space. Isn't that like, blows my mind. So yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Okay, lovely to see you. Today's chat was going super fast, so I wasn't able to super catch up, but I'm gonna read up on them when I end the stream and once it's posted. Thank you again for being here. You know I love seeing you guys all the time. RJ, hello to Canada. Whoa, we're in Canada, Switzerland. Where else are we at? Yeah. Okay, lovely guys. I'll see you next week. I almost don't want to hang up, but I should. Okay. Bye. Darwin. Oh, you're from. Okay, you're in, but you live in. Okay, cool. Darwin. I keep saying I'm going to go, but then I'm like hang out some more. Okay, seriously. I'll see you guys next week. Bye bye.